prediction, we're seeing prediction markets are colliding with ethics, regulations, and the integrity of real world events. Like right now, the big thing is we're seeing, especially over the last weekend, betting on human lives. There were a lot of the prediction markets allowed users to bet on the fate of whether or not one of the two pilots would be rescued. And lawmakers are now calling that disgusting and forcing some of the companies to pull the wager and launch an internal investigation. And then also now we're seeing right now a lot of insider trading where people have prior knowledge and are placing bets where there's no way they could have thought about what the bets are. You know, we're seeing bets now tied to the war, political violence, and even deaths, certainly creating ethical problems. And a lot of insider bets have been placed just before major geopolitical events, fueling suspicions that some traders may be acting on privileged information. They're even influencing traditional financial systems with hedge funds and tradings reporting using this data to guide decisions in the market, like oil futures. NFL now chiming in sounds the alarm on what they now call manipulable betting. The sports world is finally pushing back. The NFL has formally warned prediction platforms to stop offering bets on highly manipulable events, including injuries, officiating decisions, which, you know what, when I gambled, I get that one, and player transactions. And what's that doing? And again, affects everybody, the bettors, the fans, the leagues, the players, and everything else, sort of incentivizing insider leaks, undermining the game's integrity, and sort of blurring the line between legal trading and illegal gambling. The government now is really pushing against these poly markets. Like some of the states, like where Arizona or Utah, Arizona in a case where sports betting is legal, now it's competing with the through the poly markets, now competing with things like FanDuel and DraftKings. And we're seeing the outcome can not just shape the prediction markets, but the future of online sports betting in America. You know, what what started as a niche corner of the internet, I heard about these years ago. They've been around for a long time, but now prediction platforms are being integrated into trading strategies. They're backed by major institution and handling billions in volume. But, sort of what's really happening, and sort of my last word of it, what it's doing now is, and I think it's really dangerous, is gamifying real world tragedy. Back to you, Deb.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's hard for me. I heard that there were people betting on who this is heavy, so who was going to commit suicide first, anyone who'd been detained, which demographic were going to kill themselves first. Um, this is an issue, the romanticizing and gamifying human life. And this is the direction we're going in unless we, you know, bring this to light that this is just not just, I mean, what immoral, but this is a huge concern. For me, I also think that prediction markets and the way people are playing with things. It's highlighting where human beings are right now. It's highlighting the way we are thinking, generations of thinking, like a lack of sort of connection or care. It's not funny, the Palisades being on fire, right? But I remember there were people betting on how quick the Palisades fire was going to spread. And so this is a big topic.
And
Thoughts
you
on
think
prediction markets?
my theory, and I mean, obviously, as a compulsive gambler, like the more options you have to gamble, the more you want to gamble, the more you want to put more on it, the more that if you have a bet, you want to put another bet in because now you can bet on how many points are scored, who scores last. And I think that poly market is almost And like you just said, Deb, it makes people root against their own interests because they can put money on it. And so therefore people, if somebody does bet the opposite side of the good thing, like are they rooting for that? And I just wonder, and I guess Mark, to you, like, do you think that obviously if we can't get rid of gambling as a whole, which it just seems like it's too much money being made, would it be better to make it where it's simplified? You know, if it was just you can bet win or lose, or poly markets where bet if the stock market is higher or lower at the end of year. Like, do you think that would be a good compromise?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with gambling. I don't have a problem with prediction markets. When they first came out, they were very helpful in determining, should we do things and not by people betting one way or people betting. It wasn't more about the money. It was more about by predicting things of whether it's more than likely going to happen. But now, as Deb just said, of it being gamified, it's changed. It's changed everything, and especially being able to bet on tragedy. Uh, I don't believe, I'm not against gambling at all, but I think it needs to be heavily regulated. And I think that's where we need to go because, as I stated before, all the insider trading of not knowing, of being able to market on TV. I'm not against sports betting. I'm against all the marketing and bet $5 to win 300 and having influencers tell people, young men, that it's okay to bet because they do, or that they give the
Mhm.
assumption. They probably don't. And we'll hear more from Bob G about that a little later. So, yeah, I think it's way more about regulation. But unfortunately, what I'm hearing here also, there's so much money being made by the companies. The leagues are actually, even though they're talking against it, the more people bet on it, the more people are watching the games, the more people are buying merchandise. And the states, I don't know if anybody knows this, and I'll finish on this, is New York State gets over $2 billion a year from sports betting revenue. They get 55% of the profits. And why are they going to want to give up $2.2 billion? I think that's what it was last year. But a great question, Jared. Thank
Well,
you.
in the Times Square, they're about to put a huge casino, so there's going to be some rivalry there with the casino and the sport. As we know, the sports betting industry and the casinos are that they're rivals, and then now the sports betting industry are worried about Kalshi and poly markets. But just another thought about the poly markets and the way that's going with. I think we have to also, look at how it it's taking away like to encourage someone to bet or the peers finding it funny to bet on whether someone's going to die. It's manipulation of the human mind. We're actually like messing around with empathy and how we're meant to feel as humans towards other humans, and making it okay to really make money out of someone else's pain. That's what prediction markets and encouraging prediction markets is doing to a generation currently, making fun out of someone else's grief and pain, which I think is a really scary thing. It's a huge issue.
I
You know,
agree. I think that having, a vested interest in a bombing or a suicide or someone dying or something like that is, even if you have that removal in the distance, it's not a family member, it's not a friend, there's something just questionable about that and just disquieting and potentially, damaging in terms of the development of empathy. And also just the addictive nature of sports media now being news media. I have people that are transitioning out of gambling, but they're hooked on the news feed. And now there's a danger that people will be watching a lot more news, kind of preparing for bets, like doing their research in the way that sports bettors consume sports media. And the news feed on political events is endless and purposefully addicting too. Also, people who feel that they have an edge because they're a poli sci major or a history major, that can now translate to betting on political events and not just sports.
which is really interesting from a historical point of view, the first sports betting goes back to the Greeks and the Romans in gladiator fights. There were bets, that's some of the biggest betting were on whether or not somebody gets cut, somebody gets killed, or whatnot. I think that's on its way, that maybe, it's almost the same thing.
Yeah, but we would hope we've come a long way since the Roman days.
Um,
Please, God. And that's the thing. We're meant to have come a long way since the
I
Roman
don't
days,
know.
but we're going back on. It literally is this feeling fun, getting fun out of betting on someone else's devastation is a topic that we should talk about on this show, right? Um, it is a worry because kids are their brains are malleable, and that's we're going to lean into what we're going to talk about later about neuroplasticity. But kids are just growing up around that. That's becoming normalized.
And
Their desensitization of compassion and finding that normal is scary, and that's what our government are encouraging. So we
yeah,
should look at the underlying message being sent.
well,
Monetary reward feels good, and when that's coupled with something that's bad or murderous or barbarous for people, reward and barbary are then intertwined. And some people, that's going to be really confusing. It's just on its face, it's something that's unethical to combine the two.
Well,
Mm.
even I think the thing that hurts the kids, like I don't if you ever go on like Twitter after, sporting events and someone didn't hit their total or just went under it or whatever, the people will like literally be writing the most harmful messages to these people and they normalize that. Like that's something like how do you normalize tweeting, I hope you die or whatever it is that they say. And I just think that like if we're growing up in a civilization where that's normalized based on monetization, like, oh, I could have made more money if you would have played better, I think is a harmful existence.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't want to make a parallel, but I guess I will with my debate with my friend who just became vegan. But he makes the point, did you go to the plant? Do you see how the cow gets killed? These are sentient beings, which I agree with. I'm eating a hamburger. There's that removal, and it's the same kind of thing. If you are in a war zone and your school is bombed, there's an immediate visceral impact, which is removed through media and internet, etc. So it's just disquieting stuff.
Mark, did you want to say anything else on about the fact that kids are enjoying, when with sports betting, big losses? We
Yeah,
touched on that last week.
yeah, no, it's a really tough situation. Especially, I know me myself. I've been in recovery for a long time. I was a young gambler and fortunately young in recovery. But it is those what I mean, I lost $100. It was devastating. I don't know where kids are getting $20,000 or $50,000, and they come into treatment with tremendous amounts of money, tremendous amounts of debt. And what we're seeing, because we've talked about this before, most calls that come into hotlines that I answer are from parents. And the parents have bailed them out the first 20 or $40,000 and now don't know what to do. So the kids are almost immune from those losses. They don't even see it until the parents decide, get a little wise and are not paying the debt, but eventually will because they're parents and they feel like their kids are being threatened or whatnot. And it really sinks in, Dan will talk a little bit more about how the brain is. The earlier the onset, that those $20,000 losses are very traumatic, and they don't see it because, it's almost like when we're having an operation, we're out, our body's still going under all that pain. And even though we don't think our parents are going to bail us out, and we're going through all that pain and sort of locking in our brain memories of those losses, and almost creates that either trauma to want to or PTSD to want to get rid of those feelings. How do we get rid of those feelings? We gamble. We don't care whether we win or lose. And
You
I
know,
yeah,
I'm an old school gambler before all this internet stuff, and I'm curious to know and interested, when you're betting today, you have to have the money. when I was gambling, you didn't have to have the money. You could call your bookie and say, "Give me $1,000," on Pittsburgh, and you didn't have to have the money. You had to get it the following week. But now you have to actually have money to gamble. You have to deposit money onto these apps or whatever. So it's a whole different animal. I'm not where they're getting.
Yes and no. Yes and no. You don't have to have money to gamble. The apps like are,
Well,
you
you
know,
have $5 to get $200, or
right,
some variation of
right,
the, free play scam.
And
right.
I think a lot of them are not because of their underage are going to traditional bookies through one older person. So a lot of them are under that same thing where they're not going on FanDuel's or DraftKings, but going through an intermediate and betting with a real bookie who's doing it on credit.
And there's a lot of that going on
Yep.
all the time. The industry are using AI, worked with Silicon Valley, every app that sports betting app is using AI and knows who you are, how shit you are at gambling, when you're going to lose, when you go to bed, who you follow, and when you lose, they funnel you money. I had a situation where this happened to one of my clients recently. Funnel money, suck straight back in the loop because you get like given, don't you lose what, $100, they'll chuck $500 at here you go, free credit, lose a
Yeah.
couple of grand. That's how they do it. The AI is working against you.
And I
The
just want to
industry.
encourage people that are curious about their free play options after they've been abstaining for a while, that when you're clicking on a free play option or something like that out of curiosity, it's a real sign that, there's a likelihood that you may go on the site and bet. So, you unsubscribe to all the websites and the emails, and when they send you stuff anyway, avert your gaze and delete, because seeing what that offer is just very tempting. It's extremely tempting, especially when you're broke, Oh my God, this offer is better than the other one. And they will up the ante, so to speak, with the free play offers. Like, wow, I get $100 just for logging on. That's a good one. They're all bad ones. They're all ploys for you to just get back on the website. They know you're a compulsive gambler, so you have to avert your gaze. Just like when you're driving down the interstate and there's Morongo Casino or whatever casino is, you just keep looking forward. You don't indulge that impulse to check. It's a really big deal. I've heard so many stories of relapse through the free play marketing.
And I have a great topic here that someone's written anonymously here. We'll do our best as a team to answer this. I was recently at dinner and overheard someone talking about using AI to facilitate their Kalshi trades. I have strong feelings about this in general, but thinking about the lack of empathy and betting on death and human life, I wonder how AI will further remove the responsibility, accountability for one's decision to be on something so sick and its outcome. AI is being used for everything, right?
You have to understand that if you bet on dark subject matter, then the algorithm is going to feed you more dark subject matter and options. Parlays on death, I'm sure, are a thing. I mean, I just thought of it. So, it's just like if you're watching YouTube videos that highlight a certain topic area, you're going to get more of that. So to cross into that, there'll be more offered to you. So, again, there's so much crap that is going to be, just served up on a platter to you with gambling. So avert your eyes and delete to the best of your ability.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point because every time they say, even for at any age, please gamble responsibly, we have no idea who's going to gamble responsibly. And that first bet, I know for myself, my first bet, at 5 years old, with pennies with my cousins, I was off to the races because I have a genetic component. My grandfather was a compulsive gambler. And or a large win, a large loss, or somebody young, especially having that, the worst thing they could do is win, Dan, on that first bet and win big. And where has that been my whole life? So yeah, no, it's very dangerous to, it's for some people, it's super easy to cross the line, like almost immediately.
There's no such thing as risk-free betting. No such thing. And this give us $5, we'll give you 300. That's not generosity. That's acquisition, customer acquisition. And they're
Right.
delighted to pay $300 to get somebody sucked in.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'm convinced that some of these sites, if they know that you haven't gambled for, let's say 10 days and you've been a frequent compulsive gambler for many, many months, they're going to give you that win early on. I've heard anecdotally that that happens. Like, wow, I didn't gamble for a while and then I hit big, especially with online blackjack. It just seems to be something that happens. And so, just like if you haven't smoked weed for a while and then you smoke weed and you're like, wow, that was fun, or how to drink when you're trying to moderate your drinking. It's that same incredibly positive experience that just can hook you back in even more so with gambling. So don't trust the win. And eventually the win is going to go south when the chase kicks in and you start losing and chasing again.
It's hard because I have clients that say, but I win. So what do I do, right? And you can win. It's designed to let you win sometimes, you know, but understand that the way these things are set up, the companies, everything, the casinos, the slot machines, the sports betting industry is set up is not for you to win. It's for them to make money. Simple as that. This is an industry out to get your money. It's not a charity situation.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
No, go for it, Dan.
I'm just curious about people, Jared, Bob, and you, Mark, the experience of winning gambling. What's that like to, have a little bit of money and make it a lot? I'm not trying to trigger anybody, but that's what is the hook for these gambling companies is the winning. Jared, what about
Yeah.
you?
I think I mean that's the feeling. I think the way the casinos are gambling is not if they let you win, they'll let you win. The key is are you gonna stop? And it's impossible. I found if I'm winning money, it's not like, oh, I'll put my phone away and go enjoy life. It's like, oh, what else can I bet on? What else can I bet on? And then next thing you know, you're betting on something you have no idea about just because you want more feeling of winning. And it's the hardest. I mean, I've never been a winner. Like I've won money a lot of times, but it goes back. You might spend stupidly in the moment, oh, let me go buy this. Hey, you want $100, and then you still go gamble all the money back, and now you're more in debt. That's been the dance and go around of that. So the feeling of winning is never I won. It's more or less I'm winning, but I'm gonna keep going. I've never been able to stop ahead.
Yeah,
What's
winning was just a license for continued activity. No win ever, what is winning? What does that mean? I won $500. You're going to take that $500 and invest in treasury bonds or, buy a stereo, whatever it might be. Winning is just continued activity. There's no winning.
there's winning before you cross the line and winning after you cross the line. The winning before you cross the line is a lot of fun. It's great. You're taking everybody out to dinner, you're the big shot. But once I cross that line into a compulsive gambling problem or a gambling disorder, whichever term you want to use, winning was a pain in the ass because that meant you had to keep gambling. Like at some point, I don't know if Bob or Jared could, I'd start getting a headache because I had all this action. What am I going to do with the money? And eventually, no, I'm going to blow it. Sometimes losing, and I don't know, other people feel the way this way, but sometimes losing everything was a relief, when I was in that winning stage because now I could take a nap or I can go to sleep or, is almost better than nothing. So, yeah. And sometimes, Gamblers Anonymous has a question. Do you ever often, after a win, return and win more? Like, yeah, I would maybe get to the parking lot and return and win more to try and win more. It's sort of what Bob said. It was just about continuous action. And here's, I think, the big kicker. As long as that bet, as long as I had action, just like a heroin addict on heroin, my world was perfect. My world was perfect. I didn't have a problem in the world.
That's a very complex component of the illness. Understanding that you cannot stop unless you've literally gone back to zero. And I've worked with lots of clients that have explained that, it's one thing is yet chasing the losses, but then also when you have money still to it's like, well, you haven't finished yet. You're not done. You've got to get it all back down to zero, like you said, just to be able to take a nap. And Dan, you could probably speak more on that. I
I
mean,
guess I'm just looking for some finality with winning where there's a sense of like, I've won, I'm done, I've won, and that finality for non-compulsive gamblers, I suppose comes after a weekend of, I partied in Vegas and I won a couple thousand. It was awesome. And, now I'm not going to Vegas for 6 months. Now Vegas is in your phone. So that experience is dangerous winning in Vegas because it's now accessible. But that's the thing. I mean, I didn't really know this when I was getting into gambling treatment in the beginning, that, this sense of winning is not pleasurable. It's stressful because you want to keep going and going and you're never done. It's never over. It just doesn't end, basically.
mm.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of when the fun stops, and that takes a long time for that fun to stop because our brain keeps saying it's fun.
And
Maybe
when does it stop?
I mean, they say in GA that it stops when you hit bottom, when you
Hmm.
hit rock bottom. And that's why feeling consequences, if not the term rock bottom, is super important for gamblers. That's why bailouts aren't good because they provide a soft landing or no landing for someone who is gambling. And what this program is geared to do, unlike a treatment program for gamblers, is to prevent them to slide into consequences that are just terrible. Like Mark said, post-traumatic stress disorder, being alone and being up and down and up and down and up and up and up and down for weeks is worse trauma, in my opinion, than what a lot of veterans have when they go to war. And they're, like it's silly. It's not silly to compare the two. That is traumatic. And we're trying to help people realize that I've had some bad experiences with sports betting already, and I don't want to have some absolutely terrible life-threatening experiences. And that's what this program is about, to prevent people from hitting rock bottom, to look at their gambling and to make a change before it morphs into something that's really damaging or life-threatening.
Yeah, I really agree with
Prison,
you.
insanity, or death. That's what they say. That's the end of the game in compulsive gambling. In GA, they say prison, insanity, or death.
Do you
It's a
believe that,
multiple.
Bob?
Or recovery.
Choice. It's a multiple choice question.
I add always or recovery. In Gamblers Anonymous, and it's a lot what you said, Dan, and I think that's the point of this whole show is, the first step says we're powerless and our life has become unmanageable. And most people, if I ask them which one's the more important one, they say the powerless. I say, no, you wouldn't be seeing me unless your life was manageable. It's the unmanageability. And if we could get a point across the point of once that unmanageability just starts, because we have a high tolerance for taking unmanageability. Sometimes it takes somebody to be suicidal. That's how unmanageable their lives need to be to hit that bottom that you were talking about. But if we can get them to make a soft landing, just when they start realizing, here's one, I'm starting to lie about my gambling. That's still probably in the problematic stage. And, you're still a cucumber, you're not a pickle yet, where you could still go back to the way you were.
Yeah. If there's kind of light stealing, if a credit card or but
Yeah.
maybe a few hundred light lying lives of omission or just white, quote unquote, white lies, and you're gambling more and you're getting more stressed about it, this is a progressive disease and you need us, this program, and you need to talk about it, get the support, the accountability, so it doesn't progress to a really dark place, which it can do quickly.
While we're talking, I'm just going to launch a poll for people in the audience just to complete for us. It's just a check-in. Have you seen gambling? Has it had a negative impact even in your own life or someone else's? Um, if that poll isn't relevant to you, no need to complete it, but please have a look and see if you can fill it out. Um, Talking about rock bottoms, obviously this is stop betting sports, but we do talk about generally like all gambling behaviors. Rock bottoms look different and feel different depending on your age. And so we have a large amount now of adolescents gambling, and taking part in sports betting, using the apps on the phone, finding all sorts of creative ways of doing that. The reason it's difficult, or different, I should say, when you're treating youth, is because of reaching them and having them realize why it is a problem, how it can be dangerous for them. And it's difficult to do that because young people do not have the same ideas about a rock bottom as, say, a 45-year-old married man who's just, you know, put another 500 grand on his house by getting you with his HELOC money, and might lose his marriage, right? So rock bottoms are different depending on age, and we work with a lot of parents who are trying to reach, like metaphorically reach their child or their young adult person, and trying to get them to realize the dangers of gambling harms. Does anyone want to add anything on that? The differences with youth?
You know, Deb, as we see on this poll right now,
Hmm.
you have half of the yeses are from parents, somebody close to me.
Hmm.
And I think you hit rock, and like I say, I deal mostly with parents. You hit rock bottom when the parents start changing, when the parents stop enabling the gambler. Dan was talking about bailouts before. That's sort of treating the symptom, it's not treating the problem. But I've seen in so many cases when parents uh, go to something like Gammon or going into treatment themselves to enable and empower themselves to set up really good boundaries. Uh, it even allows them to love their kid who's gambling, but they're not going to get hurt by their kid. And the more the parents change, it seems like more the kids, run out of avenues to get money, because the kids will take money from everywhere. I can't tell you how many stories I hear about taking money from their grandmother, their aunt, from anywhere else. But once that money stops flowing, and they have to maybe deal with the consequences of trying to figure out how to eat or how to pay their rent. Um, I think that really is very helpful.
Yeah, we did the parent group on Tuesday, just so everyone in the audience knows. We Dan and I have, it's called Chat with Dan. It's Tuesday, 5 o'clock PST, Pacific Standard Time. For anyone who is interested, we are talking directly to parents and affected individuals of gambling harms. Really hard-hitting stories, and the amount of money, as you just said, Mark, the amount of money that kids take, finding creative ways of taking or stealing from their parents, is incredible.
And part of it, in my opinion, is mitigated by the reality of gambling disorder. That is, a problem gambler really does feel that they're not really taking or stealing the money, in some cases, because they're gambling and they're just going to win it back, and that they're going to replace it soon. And that's a level of stress for that individual, especially when the parents are going to get really pissed off when they discover that the money's gone. So there's a lot on the line. It's like getting caught with marijuana in the house, you know? So there's just this tension. And so you're watching a game as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, and you're going to get busted if they lose. It's just a terrible thing. But I want parents to know that it is about the brain disorder and not purely about the fact that they took money that didn't belong to them or lying. It's part of the criteria of gambling disorder is that people lie and take
You know,
stuff that
it's
don't belong to them.
it's funny, Dan, that you said that because I don't know. Sometimes I see the older gamblers for sure. They're going to steal money and put it back in their head, but I don't see that as much with the younger gamblers. That they, sort of to even add to what you're saying, they feel the consequences a lot heavier and a lot deeper at that age because their brain's still forming and they still love their parents. And they know they're doing something wrong. I see it more there where the consequences are even higher for younger gamblers than for, say, an older gambler who embezzles money from their company thinking they're going to put the money back. Here, they stole the money. The kids don't know sometimes that difference between right and wrong, and it's more like they stole, uh, if that makes sense.
I also think the kids are struggling with life as the phone is, and anyone under the age, I would say, of 30 is 90% of your life where you communicate, emails, work, and just having the phone also be the casino, I think is very difficult because you may be trying to quit, but you're also on the same device that any impulse can put you right back there. And so I just think that it makes the rock bottom a lot harder to get to, considering that it's not like, 30 years ago where you would have to go to a casino or even reach out to a bookie and get a response. You can literally get on it at 2 a.m. I just think it makes it more difficult for kids to get away from it.
Speaking of kids as well, is anyone pivoting to you, Bob? But has anyone seen the Drake live streaming on a platform called Kick, which is a live stream platform, and encouraging, like, well, it's encouraging to me, young men to play on these slot machine games. I mean, the the fact that we have celebrities, people, role models that young people look up to, just encouraging, endorsing the gambling industry, you know, this is why we have to be here and with our megaphone because we have people like Drake and some others. In fact, I'll just hand it over to you, Bob, if you got anything to say. I think you do about Drake.
Well, thank you. This is a really important part of the conversation, the influence, without accountability. And, I'm on a mission to, if possible, I'm going to confront some of these guys like, LeBron James. I call him LeBron Shames and Kevin Hart, Kevin No Hart. They're not marketing gambling. They're normalizing behavior, and I just think that there has to be a symmetry with these influencers and these leagues. They've got to tell both sides of the story. And people are not aware of the second side of the story. And like I said earlier, there's no such thing as free money. But and these influencers have such, power. And you know, they're capitalizing on their fortune and fame without awareness of the consequences. And I'm just wanting to demand equal time, and that they are exposing the full picture, but they're not willing to do that because it's such a source of revenue and so forth. And I I want to encourage balanced messaging, and they on those commercials you need the Hubble telescope to see got a problem 1-800 gambler. You can't even see it. It's the font is like an eighth of an inch, on top of a $4 million production. Um, and I just think these influence, they need to consider both sides of the story.
Yeah, who's LeBron James working with?
He's DraftKings, he and they're doing DraftKings, and um, it's incredible to me that the NBA allows him to do this, and the leagues have to start taking some responsibility. I think
Yeah, but Bob,
you can't.
no, but LeBron James has to pay his mortgage too, right?
Well,
Come on.
he has no problem with that. But I said this last week. I mentioned, these athletes. They don't care if, they're getting paid, win or lose. They're getting paid, and I said earlier, you would see some really phenomenal games if the losers didn't get paid. It'd be a whole different animal. You'd see some fierce, fierce stuff. But LeBron gets in his Rolls Royce and drives back to his mansion. That's it.
Well,
And it's really dangerous. And once again, they need to both sides of the story needs to be exposed. I'm not against gambling at all. I'm against, who's promoting it and how it's framed and who's getting hurt. That's what needs to be discussed, I think.
Yeah, you have this huge juggernaut of billions of dollars of marketing and advertising, people like heroes like LeBron James, superstars, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time on the court, not off, peddling this stuff. And then, yeah, gamble responsibly. Well, how can people gamble responsibly when the marketing and advertising is so irresponsible? It's not a fair fight.
What's even worse is in the DSM-5 on gambling, African Americans have a higher prevalency rate to develop gambling problems. And think about that, you know, think about, I don't know how to say it right, but their own community, putting them at even more jeopardy. It really makes absolutely no sense to me. I can't imagine there nobody that they don't understand what they're doing. You know,
Influence without accountability is irresponsible.
we, all right, so I worked for I was doing broadcast and then I a lot of money to go to Prize Picks, and at the time I hardly knew what they were, but that was if they used fantasy gaming as the title. And I'm years out so I could talk about it, but I remember uh, the C-suite level was a bunch of white guys, typical CEO looks, but they would use nothing but black entertainers to come in marketing. So I was in a commercial, and then I would go into Atlanta, and that's obviously I had my own problem I'm dealing with, but to see so many people come to me and show me how they were playing this, and you just realize that 90% of the revenue, at least in Atlanta, what I was seeing, like how much money they were making, was coming from people who, and I mean, just as a black person telling you, we're not the highest when it comes to the wage gap. So the people who need their money were spending their money on hope. That's what you're buying when you're gambling. You're buying hope.
And there's, in the program I do and what I've seen being a gambling counselor for 10 plus years, is there not a lot of black people that are presenting for gambling disorder. It's other ethnicities. And so there's this huge problem of black people that are gambling and are being targeted to by a $1 billion industry by heroes like LeBron James and Kevin Hart, and they're not presenting for treatment for various reasons. Maybe because most treatment providers are white, maybe there's a comfort level there, but that is the case,
but
so
Yeah, there's glam.
we need more black treatment providers, in my opinion.
uh,
And well, I mean,
That's
I'm not saying
a,
that that's a whole
but
I,
other.
but but
I
but I
think
but
it,
I
I could
don't see that.
hold on. I think it's raising awareness using
I
this
want to say that
platform.
I could treat whatever ethnicity there,
Yeah,
there is,
But
but there's a huge problem in certain communities that is not being addressed, including the black community.
but I think it's different. I think it's the way people seek different cultures or ethnicities seek treatment. Like when I worked for UCLA, we saw that it was mostly their religious leaders that African Americans would go to, or they had me go to barbershops, African American barbershops to talk about it, where that conversation might be better there. There are other populations, like a lot of Eastern cultures, that are shame-based. They're not going to go to a GA meeting and share with a whole bunch of people, or even have the shame to contact, call 1-800-GAMBLER or whatever the helplines are. So we need to sometimes reach those ethnicities where they're at and use maybe non-traditional ways to get them into treatment. Uh,
absolutely. And then there's the Latino community. There's a lack of awareness, understanding mental health illnesses, and then the gap between having something going on and being able to reach treatment or any sort of education about the issue. So that's hopefully another thing that this show can do for people. It's just such an important point that
And the
there are so
belief that yeah, the belief that treatment works or that the treatment is some sort of, thing that is, strange to talk to a stranger about what's going on. What's good about treatment and talking to a counselor is you just get the dialogue in your head in the world with someone else that is, hopefully listening and asking some good questions, but you just hear yourself saying these things out loud, and then the person is trained and they'll reflect and kind, and it's a dialogue, and it just feels better after the end of it. You're
Yeah, and
talking for an hour.
I think number one is raising awareness, helping everyone, any demographic, understand what gambling disorder looks like, how it feels, what to recognize in someone else and yourself, and just getting that message out there. And hopefully that's another thing what we're doing here, raising awareness, and then stigma and this whole thing about stigma and gambling addiction, how it, being honest about it when you realize that is what's going on in you, how that feels on you brings a lot of shame. So there's gambling addiction has for years carried stigma, but not so much now, unfortunately, in the younger generation. The problem we're having is it's a shame if you're not gambling. You should be gambling. Where's your phone? How much you lose? But yeah, I think that's such a great point to make about the demographics and who's getting treatment, why not. Very interesting to talk about. Gambling disorder does not discriminate who you are, how much money you have, what job you do, what color you are, what language you
Hmm.
speak. Gambling disorder is worldwide, and we are in America behind with helping people with understanding it. And in the UK, we haven't got our British speakers on today, but next week in the UK and Australia and Europe, they are miles ahead. They do not allow people to advertise gambling on the TV. They do not shove gambling in the children's faces. We do over here. Isn't that funny? Isn't it funny what we're doing in America and aren't questioning it? Well, we are, but they don't do that in Australia. And I mean, we all know that Australia
Hmm.
are ahead of the curve, stopping anyone under 16 using Instagram, right? So protecting our children, understanding that we need to protect our children, our youth, and what gambling harms is doing. That's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
Jared? Oh,
They show the win, but they don't show the spiral. That's when it's in. Both sides of the story need to be exposed, in my opinion. And once again, we're not about stopping gambling. We're about treating people that can't do it. Some people simply can't do it.
Do you
yeah,
think that
there's
maybe it's because it's relatively new? I mean, they're making a lot of money, but like one of the first states to legalize it was what, 2014, 2015. And so we still haven't even shooken out how bad this is. And I think, the wave of the problem probably was maybe 20 years from the initiating day. So I know like in Europe, yeah, two years I've been there, I feel like it's been legal for a while, but people know how dark it is, and I think we're still blind into, LeBron James doesn't know how many lives he's ruining by dancing on they're paying him big money for that, by the way, because he's like doing stand-up comedy and like LeBron's not gonna do an ad for Subway. You got to pay big money to get him to do that, but he doesn't know the damage he's doing because we haven't fully figured out the weight of this legalized gambling.
Well, he's
I,
going to
Right.
know soon, Jared. He's going to know soon because he's going to have me and especially Bob G after him once we're finished with this. He's going to
there's
know us and
Yeah.
our names.
They're,
there's a
Go,
they're,
dep
Bob. Go,
they're,
there's
Bob.
a
they're
well,
attempting to normalize the behavior, and that they're normalizing the behavior. It's not, it's once again, both sides of the story need to be exposed.
Go, Mark, because then I've got a question from the audience. Go, Mark.
okay, real quick. There's a demographic we're not talking about, and that's high school athletes. And I
Yeah.
think that that's where we could have the most effect. Is almost every high school in the country, the athletes, and it's a hidden thing, and nobody, it's like Fight Club. Nobody talks about Fight Club, but they're all gambling, and a lot of them are creating problems. If we can get to them there, or even younger, middle school, I think we have a shot.
well, I want to say that, Deb and I have been doing some outreach in LA, and we're going to go to Pali High this Friday to talk about this issue, and we're going to be going to Santa Monica High School, most likely, very, very likely, the week after that, and some inroads with LAUSD to actually, present face to face on this issue with people that are gambling. We know high schoolers are gambling, and high school athletes are gambling more than your typical high school student.
And I think it'd be important, Dan, for you to have some separate sessions with the coaches. So the coaches know how to identify early signs of gambling. I am sure most of them don't, and they don't have any idea what's going on. But if you can get to the coaches, I think that would be a real big help. What do you think, Jared, on that?
Yeah, no, I think coaches and especially in high schools are like secondary parents, and I think that if they can help address it and stop, if you get to a point you're hiding your gambling from your coach, you already know that like this is a problem, and so I do think that like the role models of the kids is probably the best one to attack. And again, I'm not a teenager now, but I still think that it's a stigmatized gambling help, and even talking about it is kind of one of those things where it's not cool. And so I don't know if the kids, we hope they're receptive, but I do think if the cool persons, i.e., the coach, the young coach, the assistant coach, is one also pushing the message, it comes off a little bit more pure and fresh.
I think these prop bets, being able to bet on individual performances on a team sport, they've destroyed the foundation of athletic competition, and and they're the guy's aware, hey, I need to catch four passes. And the quarterback is aware, holy shit, I got to throw this guy another pass or whatever. And there's too much opportunity for collusion. And I think that eventually these prop bets, I think some people they've been banned, I think, in a few states. I'm not sure, but I heard that. But that's where these coaches come in and the kids come in and they understand, you could be suspended, you could end your career, and that,
Yeah, one NCAA violation and you're done. That's it. Uh, and they're checking.
Good. Yeah, because that's your whole career. And we actually, as a therapist, that athletes are very specific when it comes to treatment. So hard to. I have a question. I think I can answer it, but I'm going to just throw out to everyone: is sports betting bound to be on the up and up due to the World Cup? Um, yes, yes. Anything going on, the Olympics, anything going. We have the most amount of bets placed in the year is usually the weekend of Super Bowl. And the most calls for DV, domestic violence, on that day too in America. But yeah, we are bound to see more an increase in sports betting when any sort of sporting event. I mean, there's just more opportunity, isn't there? There's something else to bet on. So due to the economic situation and inflation, hopefully social awareness. Yeah. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
well, soccer is the most popular spectator sport in the world. I mean, it's played, around the world. And that's the activity for World Cup. It's not only going to here in US, it's global.
It
Yeah,
def
I just noticed the seasons, having, worked with sports betting addiction for some years, you know, Super Bowl or, now it's March and now the intensity of March Madness and then the sort of lull, but also the enticement of baseball and people that really do well betting on baseball and a break for the All-Star break. And now we're starting basketball. It's kind of like being an academic and all the semesters. It just kind of, there's a flow to each year of sports and sports betting, and you react differently in April than you do in March, than you do in January and February, and kind of like reaches a fever pitch in the fall or the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
you
But at
know.
the height of my gambling, every game was a Super Bowl and every horse race was the
Yeah.
Kentucky Derby. Every horse race was a Kentucky Derby. And I didn't need, that's all that media hype.
keep going, guys. I'm going to launch the next poll. This will be the final poll of the day. If it doesn't apply to you, that's fine. But this does apply to people who are gambling. If you can see it, great. have a go. Um, Dan, we were going to talk about some psycho ed on something I thought that the audience might find really interesting on when we are in recovery and you're learning about your brain. We do a lot of that as
Hmm.
clinicians, is teaching how your brain is able to rewire itself. And it's important that you understand that.
Yeah, one of the important things with the concept or the reality of neuroplasticity is that the brain can change. Just like when you're gambling a lot or you have a big win or you have many, many episodes of gambling's ups and down, you're changing the structure and the function of certain systems in the brain. When you stop and you start doing things differently and start establishing new patterns and habits, your brain heals, it gets better. And thinking about brain health in a lot of the same ways that we thought about heart health and cardiovascular health, that you want to start working out your brains in ways that that alter positively the structure and the function of the brain. And a good way of thinking about it is that, there are two different parts of the brain, the brain that is seeking dopamine and seeking pleasure, and the part of the brain that wants to inhibit those things. And so by abstaining from gambling, that's a pattern that you're establishing over time. And by instigating new habits like exercise or eating well, or a structured morning routine, you're doing something that is really, really good for the brain. Um, I'm here in San Francisco. I used to be a public school teacher here, and I was thinking about my experience teaching at Washington High School near where I am right now. I was a special ed teacher, and at the end of the day, we had chores and expectations of each person in the classroom. Putting away the art supplies, pushing in the chairs, or putting them on top of the desk. The activity of actually doing the chore, while not pleasurable, there was something about that activity and being industrious and being contributory that was good. So, like making a bed doesn't provide pleasure, but doing it and seeing it done does. And then we would put a star on the board, for everybody. Acknowledging and monitoring those activities are very good for the brain too. Noticing that you're making progress, not just counting days and not gambling, but other activities that are very positive. And then the public acknowledgement of the other students of seeing the stars on the board. So you did something, you acknowledged it, and then you got the social support. And that's kind of, the structure of a lot of programs. I think you're doing something good, you're doing something different, you're monitoring it, and you're getting support for it. And all of those things are very good for, boosting dopamine and changing the brain in a positive way. I've said this in the treatment program as well. It's not just the Monday night group that we do or the Thursday night group. It's the fact that you're going to a group and you're doing the activity. The therapist is going to try to make the group as good as the therapist can. Some groups are going to be better than others. Some will be terrific and some will be, less than terrific. But you know that you're going to that appointment. You know that you're going to the Sunday project meeting. You know that you're going to wake up and rain or shine, you're going to do that mile run. That knowledge that you're doing it and then following it through is as important as getting the mile run in. You're going to do it. And starting those new habits are hard, especially when you're healing from gambling addiction, but it's definitely positive. Finally, what I'll say on this little educational thing is that, when you're withdrawing from gambling addiction, you're often almost always broke financially and you're feeling depression. Even if you're not clinically depressed, you're feeling a degree of hopelessness that things are going to get better or it's going to take so long. And it will take a while to get things better. But the situation is not hopeless and you're not helpless to change it by making your bed, by doing the run, by coming to a program like this, which will always be free and always be going on, um, things will begin to get better because you're committed to doing it. That commitment, that decision is good for your brain, and then showing up is good as well. And then making some change and getting some support from others, whether it's a coach, a therapist, or just checking in with this meeting and saying, hey, I didn't gamble this week, and this is what I did. It's all positive for changing the brain, not rocket science.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Dan. Addiction is a brain disease, and unfortunately, we treat the symptoms and we don't treat the brain. And a lot of it is about dopamine. And when we're gambling, as our tolerance grows, I mean, what explains tolerance in gambling, the bets get bigger is because we need more and more dopamine. And we need to sort of bring that down. And whatever we do of giving things a higher power, I always use that term, it's completely spiritual, it's not religious or anything, to start giving hiking a higher power or going to a therapy meeting. But to me, one of the best, and to avoid doing other things that give out dopamine, because that just sort of primes, especially in younger people, cannabis. If they're going to stop gambling, is to stop cannabis use also, because they'll play against each other and keep that need to get action always higher. Um, and there was a point I wanted to make is when, oh, empathy. I've learned that you get dopamine from empathy. And you go to a GA meeting or some other meeting like that, and you hear good stories. I know me and Bob were driving back from a meeting last Saturday night, and we're talking about all the great shares, like much better than any of the wins that I would be driving home with. It was that feeling of seeing people get better and having empathy, and really having empathy because in self-help support, I really know how you feel, and I can understand and relate to your feelings. And I find that really helpful in terms of helping with the brain, and helping that brain disease part. There's a point.
Young kids don't take into consideration consequences. They haven't played out consequences, and the consequences associated with this disease, like destroying credit ratings and what, consequences are a big part of the story that need to be exposed and talked about.
Yeah, there's a part of Gamblers Anonymous and 12-step programs, a saying that is so moving and touching. And what we aspire to in this program is you are not alone. You are not alone in your struggle to overcome an addiction. And there's something very powerful about that connective tissue. There's no shame in admitting that you have a gambling addiction, or for that matter, an alcohol addiction or any mental health challenge. And seeing the commonality among other people is incredibly powerful, healing, and moving. And then as you get further into a program like GA, you might become a sponsor or a mentor and you start helping someone else and you discover the pleasure of being a helping individual, which helps yourself. Just like if you're trying to learn something, teach it. If you're trying to feel better yourself, be a helper to someone else. And that's one of the goals here.
We think we're terminally unique.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another topic, but there's a self-absorption to addiction, a specialness, and it's a problem that is shared by a lot of people. Very quickly, just another, concept we teach in our program is a dopamine break is a quick hit, not of gambling, but of what does David say? Cheap dopamine versus earned dopamine. Earned dopamine. So you want to earn your dopamine. So I refer to a guy named Peter Shankman who wrote a book on ADHD. He would go to the staircase and run up and down the stairs to earn his dopamine because his ability to produce serotonin and dopamine was diminished because of his ADHD, which is one of the symptoms or one of the underlying factors of that. So whether it's closing your computer, putting away your phone, going outside and doing 15 push-ups or 20, however many you can do, or 50 in my case, um, yeah, earn your dopamine, take the break. And there's probably no better way to do that than cardiovascular type health. You know, motion creates emotion, running in place, jumping jacks, burpees, whatever it is, maybe for 60 seconds. There's a great app, I think, called 7 Minute Workout. That's harder than it seems, but get that heart rate up for 45 seconds, take a break, get that heart rate up, and your dopamine goes up.
Yeah, as we work in treatment with people that have really had it rough with gambling disorder, one of the first things we start with is um, looking at your routine. You know, getting up and making that bed is something I talk about one of the first sessions with anybody I start working with. But sleep, diet, and exercise, we call it the big three. Very important to look at your sleep hygiene. Your diet is huge, as food is medicine, and exercise is the focusing on treating the brain. This is a behavioral addiction, it meaning it's, complex, but not absolutely not impossible to work with. Neuroplasticity, the brain is malleable, and teaching ourselves new habits to overlie all the habits that you've been in. And we'll talk more about neuroplasticity probably next week. But
A little bit more.
Mhm.
Just a note on making the bed too. This may apply to some, if not all. My mother is in the other room. You know, um, there was tension for me growing up. I mean, I'm talking about my childhood now, about making beds because I would do it hastily. I would not do it correctly. And my mom has pointed out, even in this trip at my advanced age, that, there's a level of making your bed. And yesterday morning, I came in and my mother's version of a made bed was superior to mine. And this morning, maybe in preparation for this group so I could talk about it, but I don't think so. I'm aspiring to make my bed as well as my mother would like me to. And so there's a level of quality in this. It's not just a half-hearted thing. It's the fact that I'm mindfully making the bed, and when I see the visual, it's pleasing and a little different. So I really am going to aspire to make the bed in a tight way with the four corners as my mom would like. Like don't let yourself up. Don't just like, oh, that's a made bed, like hastily cursory. Like make it well.
Jared, are you someone that is making your bed every day, and also interested to know how you're managing yourself at the moment with your urges and things go.
Well, I'm definitely trying to rewire my brain. I spend a lot of time compounding bad habits, and so I have been struggling with trying to distract myself. My brain is looking for something. Is it sugar? Is it phone? Is it cell phone? And I was gonna go back to Arizona this weekend to see my daughter because it's Easter, but I could just feel with the way I was feeling and the boredom that I was like, man, that's not a good idea. So I decided to stay in LA. I've been going for walks and it is getting better, the further you get. But I will say that this SBS has helped me out a lot. It gives me an extra sense of accountability. We made it another week, which is, stacking those things. And yeah, I want to continue to do that. I'm definitely trying to rewire my brain. Things like making the bed and earning dopamine are there, but it's hard. It's hard to make your brain want to run a mile more so than open up an app and instant dopamine. So yeah, but I'm in the process of it and it's getting better week by week.
So glad to hear that SBS is doing that for you. And also, I had no idea you were in LA, so I'm going to come and hunt you down and give you one of these jackets, just so
I'm the only one
everyone
without
knows.
it. I'm the only one without the drip.
Just so everyone knows, these jackets are big in the game. Made by Bob G, Mr. Bob G himself. Thank you, Bob. Um, I'm sure we're going to figure out a way to make it possible for people to purchase these jackets as we go along down the line. We are coming to close to the end. If there are any questions Anyone has in the audience that you just wanted to throw out there quickly before we get right to the end? I've had a few questions been asked along the way, but we are here to answer your questions and any sort of concerns you might have. Please be mindful and remember we have our Tuesday night group for parents, which is 5 o'clock, as I said. Um, Dan and I are there to take anyone's, questions in that group too. But Jared, that's great to hear it. Yeah, no, it's a hard 3 weeks, right, Jared?
No, no. I mean, I think the last bet I put in was the end of February, so it's been a while. It's just to a point of difficult. And I just knew, given the circumstances of like, there's a big game. It's one thing if there's a lot of sports, you don't have to watch it, but basketball is like big, and all my brothers and friends, and that world is going to be heavy. So I'm deciding it's better for me on the long term to even suffer a little bit. That's what how getting healthy is at first suffering and then ultimately getting better.
It's true. Like the push-ups are hard to do and they don't provide that dopamine spike that gambling will. And there's going to be a period that could last a while, but it does get better of discomfort, suffering, real unpleasantness, and you don't need to go through it alone. But it is hard, and it's going to be a personal battle for every individual. In the end, you have to manage yourself, and you spend a lot of time alone and with yourself, and that's just the reality of life. Yeah.
Yeah, and people ask me, I'm not in recovery. And I always tell them the first minute you make the call, the first second, like when you're in the stages of change, when you're in that action thing and you make the call to a hotline or tell somebody, that's when recovery starts. And along the way, there are a lot of relapses, there's a lot of other stuff, but sometimes that's what the process that needs to take place. As long as you stick with it. I often tell people go to one meeting a week for the rest of your life. Even if you relapse, you're going to have a great life because you're going to pounce back on it. And this is sort of to add more to the brain disease. It's not an acute disease; it's a chronic disease that needs to be treated in most cases for the rest of your life. And to figure out what that works for. I just want to make one last comment on the bed. Like I used to, as a sponsor, you make your sponsees make their bed in the morning, and it's such an important thing because you don't want to do it. It's the first thing in the day. You make the bed and you are happy. You're looking at that bed.
Yeah,
And then when you go to bed, you're going onto really nice sheets and
that's right.
everything is good. And it sort of is a crossover from morning to night.
Yes. You and my mom should talk. We had a conversation about this.
Well, it's what
Yeah.
a lovely end to the show today. I just want to thank everyone here in the as speakers, Dan, Bob, Mark, Jared. Thank you again so much for everything you bring. This is a movement. We're here for anyone, any Sunday who just doesn't want to gamble, trying to stop gambling, wants to understand it, needs a bit of help and support. We will be here. All right, very simply. Thank you to all of you in the audience for completing the panels and showing up today. We would love to see you again next week. Next week, we will be featuring Rob Odat and Matt Cousins, who created Gamban, which is the app that stops you from gambling. Very interesting conversations coming up next week in the show. So, would love to see you all again. If you need any help, please reach out. That brings us to the end. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Deb.